You are about to witness one of the most calculated psychological warfare tactics ever seen in history. Did they simply imprison Marie Antoinette for 76 days? No. They systematically stripped away her humanity, piece by piece. And it all began with an 8-year-old child. Forget everything you think you know about the guillotine. That blade was a mercy. The true horror lay in what came before, something far darker. They discovered Marie Antoinette's single vulnerability and exploited it with such ruthlessness that this event still casts a chilling shadow over historical records today. This is the story of prisoner number 280, and I'm going to show you exactly what they did to her. July 3rd, 1793, midnight, Temple Prison in Paris. You hear the echo of bootsteps in the stone corridors, heavy, determined footfalls, drawing closer. Marie Antoinette sleeps beside her 8-year-old son, Louis Charles. Her hand rests on the child's chest. She hasn't let him out of her sight since they guillotined his father 6 months ago. The door suddenly bursts wide open. 6 guards flood the room, holding a document, an order. They've come for the child. What happens next will echo through those prison walls for a full hour. A former queen transforms into something primal, a mother fighting for her child with every ounce of strength she has left. She hurls her body against the door. She screams until her voice breaks. She begs them to take her instead. But here's what makes this moment even worse. This isn't random violence. It's not chaos. This is a calculated move. Because the revolutionaries realized something crucial. They couldn't break Marie Antoinette with torture, starvation, or humiliation, but they could break her with her own love. And now they're going to use her son to destroy her in a way that will make the guillotine look merciful. Stay with me because what I'm about to explain takes a much darker turn than you can imagine. Before we confront the horror ahead, you need to understand who Marie Antoinette really was. Because the woman who was tortured in 1793 bore no resemblance to the caricature the revolutionaries created. Born Maria Antonia in Vienna in 1755, an Austrian archduchess, youngest daughter of Empress Maria Theresa. At 14, she was married off to France's future King Louis XVI. This wasn't love. It was geopolitics. Austria and France needed an alliance, and she was the price. The French court hated her from day one. She was Austrian, meaning she was the enemy. Young, awkward, and ignorant of French traditions. Courtiers mocked her accent, her clothes, every move she made. Even her own husband ignored her for years. Their marriage went unconsummated for a full 7 years. A humiliation that became gossip across all of Europe. So she did what any lonely young woman would do. She escaped into pleasure. Extravagant hairstyles, expensive clothes, parties at her private retreat, the Petit Trianon. The French people, starving and desperate, witnessed this excess and dubbed her Madame Deficit. When told the people had no bread, did she really say, "Let them eat cake"? No, that's propaganda. But it no longer mattered. The damage was already done. When the revolution erupted in 1789, Marie Antoinette had already become France's easiest scapegoat. She wasn't a monster. She was foreign, female, and a queen. 3 things that made her the perfect target. When the monarchy fell, the revolutionaries needed someone to blame for centuries of royal excess. They chose her. But here's the critical detail. By 1793, Marie Antoinette was no longer that frivolous party girl. She was a mother of 4 who had watched her eldest son die of tuberculosis at age 7. She had witnessed her husband being dragged to the guillotine. She had been locked in Temple Prison for months with her surviving children, knowing each day could be their last. She had already lost everything: her crown, her freedom, her husband, her country. The revolutionaries were about to teach her she could lose even more. Let me paint you a picture of Temple Prison, because this place was designed to break people long before they reached the guillotine. A medieval fortress in Paris, built by the Knights Templar. Dark, damp, suffocating. After King Louis XVI was executed in January 1793, Marie Antoinette and her two surviving children, 14-year-old Marie-Thérèse and 8-year-old Louis-Charles, were confined to a tower, under surveillance day and night. In the beginning, they were kept together. Marie Antoinette tried to maintain the illusion of a normal life for her children. She gave them lessons. They prayed together. She held them tight at night while the sounds of revolutionary crowds echoed through the streets outside. But the guards were watching, constantly watching, taking notes, reporting to the Committee of Public Safety, the revolutionary government now controlling France. And they noticed something. Marie Antoinette could endure anything except threats against her children. So they began experiments in psychological torture. First, they restricted her access to the children's rooms, forcing Marie Antoinette to beg permission to see her own son and daughter. Then, they placed additional guards inside their rooms, men who sat in the corner watching, recording everything, every conversation, every moment of affection, every tear. The children weren't allowed to speak German, their mother's native language. They were forced to use only French. This meant that even their most private family moments were monitored and controlled by the state. Marie Antoinette began to unravel. Her hair, once light brown, started turning white from stress. This condition, called Marie Antoinette syndrome, is actually a real medical phenomenon. She stopped eating. She developed bleeding that she tried desperately to hide from the guards. But she held on because she still had her children. The revolutionaries knew they needed to take that away. 2. July 3rd, 1793. The date that would define Marie Antoinette's final torment. Let me walk you through what happened that night, step by step, because the primary sources, actual testimonies from people who were there, are literally devastating. Around 10 p.m., Marie Antoinette has just put 8-year-old Louis-Charles to bed. The child sleeps in the same room. She hasn't let him out of her sight since his father's execution. Her daughter Marie-Thérèse and sister-in-law Madame Elizabeth are in adjacent rooms. Then they hear it. Boots. Multiple men climbing the tower stairs. The door crashes open. 6 municipal guards, led by a man holding an official decree from the Committee of Public Safety. They've come to take Louis-Charles. He will be re-educated by the Republic, separated from his mother's corrupting influence. Marie-Thérèse later wrote about this moment in her memoirs. She described how her mother instantly shifted from composure to something feral. Marie Antoinette threw herself between the guards and her sleeping son. She grabbed Louis-Charles and held him so tightly that the child woke crying, confused. Then she began to scream. Not the refined objections of a former queen, raw animal shrieks. "You cannot take him. You'll have to kill me first. He's just a child." The guards tried to reason with her. The order came from the highest authority. They had no choice. She didn't care. For a full hour, 60 minutes, she physically blocked the doorway. She held her son, refusing to let them pass. The guards hurled threats at her. They threatened the child. They threatened her daughter. They said if she didn't comply, they would use force and people would get hurt. Marie Antoinette continued to resist. Finally, Madame Elizabeth begged her sister-in-law to stop. The child was sobbing, terrified. Marie-Thérèse was hysterical, and the guards were getting violent. Marie Antoinette's resistance broke. She kissed Louis-Charles one last time. She whispered something in his ear. We'll never know what she said. Then she watched as 6 grown men dragged her 8-year-old son down the tower stairs. The child's screams echoing, and finally fading into silence. She collapsed to the floor and didn't move for hours. But here's where it gets truly horrific. The revolutionaries didn't just take her son. They gave him to a man named Antoine Simon, a radical cobbler specifically chosen to destroy the child. And Simon's methods were terrifying. Louis-Charles was locked in a dark, windowless room. He was forced to wear a red revolutionary cap and sing anti-monarchist songs. He was taught to curse his mother, to call her degrading names, to repeat accusations of treason and conspiracy. And when he refused, Simon beat him, starved him, kept him in isolation, until the child's spirit broke. Within weeks, Louis Charles was repeating everything he was told, including accusations so monstrous, so vile, they would be weaponized against his mother in the most horrifying way. Marie Antoinette didn't know the details, but she knew her son was suffering, and there was nothing, absolutely nothing she could do to save him. That's when they moved her to the Conciergerie. August 1st, 1793, less than a month after they took her son, guards burst into Marie Antoinette's room at Temple Prison at 2 a.m. No explanation, no warning, just an order. You're being transferred. They separated her from her daughter and sister-in-law. She begged to say goodbye. They refused. They dragged her down the tower stairs, threw her into a carriage, and took her through the dark Paris streets to a place called the Conciergerie. If you know anything about the French Revolution, you'll recognize that name. The Conciergerie was called the antechamber of the guillotine. It's where prisoners went for their final days before execution. Marie Antoinette wasn't just being moved, she was being prepared for death. But the revolutionaries wanted to make those final days as psychologically devastating as possible. She was assigned prisoner number 280. Not a former queen, not even a name, just a number. Her cell was tiny, approximately 3.5 meters by 2.5 meters. The walls were damp stone covered in mold. A thin straw mattress, a wooden table, 2 chairs, and a chamber pot. A single candle for light. No window, just the suffocating darkness of a medieval dungeon. And here's what's truly insidious. They gave her a privacy screen, a folding curtain where she could change clothes or use the chamber pot privately. Sounds humane, doesn't it? Wrong. The privacy screen was theater, because inside that cell there were always 2 armed guards, sitting in the corner, watching her every moment, eating, sleeping, changing clothes behind that useless screen, using the chamber pot, praying, crying. Constant, unblinking surveillance. This wasn't about security. She was a sick, middle-aged woman locked in a dungeon. This was psychological torture designed to strip away her last shred of dignity and privacy. Historical records describe Marie Antoinette trying to maintain her composure. She would sit for hours staring at the wall, her face completely expressionless. The guards reported that she barely spoke, barely moved, barely ate. But at night, when she thought they couldn't see in the candlelight, they heard her crying. She whispered her son's name, Louis Charles, over and over. She developed severe bleeding, likely uterine cancer or complications from stress. It soaked through her clothes and she was forced to ask the guards for rags. A humiliation she endured in front of men who stared at her mercilessly. Her hair, now completely white, began falling out in clumps. She was 37 years old. She looked 60. And then came the trial. October 14th, 1793, 8 a.m. Marie Antoinette was dragged from her cell to the Revolutionary Tribunal. This wasn't a trial. It was a show. The verdict had already been decided, but the revolutionaries needed spectacle. Something to legitimize her execution to the public and to history. The courtroom was packed. Revolutionary officials, journalists, citizens eager to witness the humiliation of the former queen. The prosecutor, a man named Antoine Fouquier-Tinville, prepared to hurl accusations of treason, conspiracy, and financial corruption. Marie Antoinette sat in the defendant's chair, pale, skeletal, dressed in widow's black. For 2 days, they rained accusations upon her. They said she collaborated with Austria, squandered France's treasury, plotted counter-revolutionary schemes. She answered each accusation with surprising composure and intelligence. She refuted false claims. She acknowledged mistakes without groveling. She refused to break. Fouquier-Tinville played his final and most venomous card. He called a witness, Jacques Hébert, a radical journalist, and he repeated accusations that Marie Antoinette's 8-year-old son, Louis Charles, had supposedly made. Under the direction of his captors, the child had claimed that his mother had engaged in an incestuous relationship with him. Let that sink in for a moment. They accused her of sexually abusing her own child, using a confession extracted through torture from an 8-year-old boy, in a public courtroom in front of hundreds of people. The room fell silent. Even the bloodthirsty crowd seemed frozen by the depravity of the accusation. Marie Antoinette had maintained her composure against every insult, every lie, every threat. But this shattered her. She stood up, her voice, which had been calm, cracked with raw emotion. "I appeal to all the mothers present in this courtroom," she said, eyes blazing. "Is there a single one among you who would not shudder at such an accusation?" She didn't address the judges. She spoke directly to the women in the crowd, to the mothers, the daughters, the sisters. For the first time in the trial, she wasn't defending herself as a queen. She was speaking as a mother whose child had been weaponized against her. "To answer such an accusation made against a mother is contrary to nature itself," she continued. "I appeal to all the mothers listening to me." The courtroom erupted in chaos. Some women in the crowd who had come to laugh at her execution broke down in tears. Even some revolutionary officials shifted uncomfortably. It was too much, too cruel. But Fouquier Tinville didn't care. He rushed through the rest of the trial. At 4 a.m. on the morning of October 16th, after less than 2 days of trial without real evidence, Marie Antoinette was found guilty of high treason and crimes against the state. The sentence: death by guillotine. The execution was scheduled for the same day, just hours later. She was given a few hours in her cell to prepare for death. In her cell, as dawn approached and death was only hours away, Marie Antoinette was finally given a pen, paper, and ink. She didn't write a political manifesto. She didn't curse the revolution. She didn't beg for mercy. She wrote a letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth, the woman still imprisoned at Temple with Marie Antoinette's daughter. This letter is one of the most heartbreaking documents in history. Let me read you some excerpts. "I write to you, my sister, for the last time. I have just been condemned, not to a shameful death, that is only for criminals, to rejoin your brother, like him, innocent. I hope to show the same fortitude in my final moments that he did. My conscience reproaches me with nothing. I feel profound sorrow at having to abandon my poor children. You know I existed only for them and you, my good and tender sister." She continued, forgiving her enemies, asking pardon for any wrongs she'd committed, and begging her sister-in-law to care for her children. "May my son never forget his father's last words, which I repeat to him explicitly. Let him never seek to avenge our deaths." She poured all her remaining love onto that page, the final thoughts of a mother, a sister, a human being facing the void. The letter ran 4 pages. She simply signed it, Marie Antoinette. Then she handed it to a guard. Here's the devastating truth. The letter was never delivered. Her guards confiscated it, and it disappeared into a revolutionary archive. Madame Elizabeth never read it. Neither did her daughter. The letter was discovered decades later, long after everyone Marie Antoinette loved was dead. Her final words to her family died in silence. October 16th, 1793, 11 a.m. The executioner's assistant entered Marie Antoinette's cell and ordered her to prepare. Every step was designed to strip away the final remnants of her identity. First, the dress. She wore a simple black mourning dress that she'd worn since her husband's death. The guard ordered her to remove it and put on a plain white shift, the uniform of the condemned. She wanted to change in privacy. The guard refused. She had to undress in front of the men who had been watching her for months. Second, the hair. Her hair, now completely white and brittle, was cut off roughly with scissors. No ceremony, no care, just rough hands and sharp blades. They were tearing away one of her last physical dignities. Third, the binding. Her hands were tied behind her back with thick rope, so tightly it cut into her wrists. She flinched and said quietly, "You didn't tie my husband's hands like this." The guard ignored her. At 11 a.m., she was led out of the Conciergerie into blinding daylight. She'd been in that dark cell for 76 days. The sunlight hurt her eyes. A closed carriage was waiting, the small mercy granted to her husband. Instead, there was a rough, open wooden cart called a tumbril, the kind used to transport animal carcasses. She was forced to climb into the cart and sit on a plank, her hands bound, exposed to all of Paris. As the cart began jolting through the streets, thousands lined the route, screaming, jeering, spitting, throwing garbage. One man sat at a window frantically sketching, Jacques-Louis David, the revolutionary painter who had voted for her death. His drawing still exists. It shows a woman, emaciated, hollow-eyed, sitting rigidly upright, her face a mask of grim dignity as the world howled for her blood. The journey to Place de la Révolution took over an hour of public humiliation designed to destroy whatever remained of her soul. It didn't work. At 12:15 p.m., the cart stopped in front of the guillotine. The crowd roared. Marie Antoinette climbed the scaffold steps without assistance. Her legs trembled, but her head was high. And in the final moment of her life, something extraordinary happened. Walking toward the plank, she accidentally stepped on the executioner's foot. She stopped, turned to him, and spoke her last words. "Pardon me, sir. I did not mean to do it." An apology to the man about to kill her. A bizarre, surreal gesture of courtesy. The final reflex of a life lived under royal protocol. But it was more than that. It was a choice. In the face of absolute degradation, she chose grace. 20 seconds later, the blade fell. The French Revolution wanted to destroy Marie Antoinette, the symbol, the Austrian woman, the spendthrift queen, the embodiment of royal excess. They subjected her to unimaginable psychological torture. They weaponized her own child against her. They stripped her of every dignity, every comfort, every shred of privacy. And in the end, they failed. Because in their obsession with breaking the queen, they accidentally revealed the human being underneath. A mother who fought desperately for her children. A woman who faced monstrous accusations with courage. A person who clung to her humanity, even on the steps of the guillotine. They wanted her remembered as the widow Capet, a traitor who got everything she deserved. Instead, history remembers Marie Antoinette, who endured 76 days of calculated cruelty and still found the grace to apologize to her executioner. That's the part they could never take from her. If this story gripped you, hit that subscribe button. Every week we dive deep into history's darkest pages and leave a comment. After learning what really happened in those final 76 days, how do you see Marie Antoinette now? Villain, victim, or something far more complex?